Our guests for the next hour, Stella Suge is the Executive Director of FilmAid Kenya, and Caroline Njuki is the Chief Technical Advisor at the International Labour Organization, ILO. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Harry.
How you doing?
Good morning, Du.
Good morning.
We are well.
Stella, can you talk for 1,000 minutes in a month? In a month?
No.
30 days?
No,
You
I
do more?
cannot. 500 maybe, half of that.
500.
Yeah.
Caroline, 1,500? Going once?
I could.
You could?
I could.
Really?
Yeah, I'm on the phone quite a bit.
You're one of those.
I haven't kept tab, but if at times it feels like
You're
could be
one
that
of those,
much.
eh?
I am one of those.
So when you
Yeah.
go to the all-in-one package, please choose the one for 2,000
Absolutely.
minutes.
That was
so
my
you're
key.
safer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you're safer, okay?
Yeah.
And then Caroline, then you can go for the one for 1,000.
1,000, yeah.
Because that way then, 500, when you think you do 500, you actually do 999.
Yeah.
Yeah, I counted last time.
Yeah.
Check. Karibuni sana.
Asante.
We are going to talk about the work that FilmAid is doing with support from ILO in refugee communities in the country and the integration of the refugee communities, right? So there's a gentleman that normally sits where you're seated right now, Caroline. And if he were here, you'd have moved so that you sit there. He gives you the seat of the house. You and your kiti ya mzee. Then he'd have moved here. His name is City Muga. He's away this week. He's on holiday. But what he normally does is every week he goes into one African country. He mines proverbs from that country and comes and gives us a proverb from that country, a proverb a day. And the job of our guests is to listen to the proverbs and give their own interpretation of that proverb. What does the proverb say to you? This week the proverbs are from Senegal. Today's proverb: to spend the night in anger is better than to spend it in repentance. To spend the night in anger is better than to spend it in repentance. What do you think the Senegalese are saying, Stella?
That's interesting. I think, of course, when you're sleeping, it's an important time because you reflect, and if you remain angry, you're pushed to come up with solutions or to think outside of the box. But of course, if you repent, you let it go. I think to really get out of what is annoying you is important to stay within it. So I think that for me would be what it is, like stay, focus on it, get the solution, get out of it.
Hey,
Very
that's a good
clever.
one. Caroline.
Yeah, very similar to what Stella says. Is also about, for me, is also how do you let go, so that. Can I counter with something similar from my community?
Okay.
And I think it's not just my community, it's probably spoken, that you shall not let the sun set as you still hold anger. So you let it go. And now specifically to the Senegalese one, if you're spending the night in repentance, it's also, you're probably going over and over, what is it that happened? And you probably building castles in the air and beating yourself up. So that's how I would say.
So it's better you sleep angry than sleep
not
there
really
overthinking about it. When you're angry, you're just pissed off, you sleep.
I believe so. other than creating scenarios throughout the night, and you hear every bad that chips every.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good ones, right?
Indeed.
There's never a wrong interpretation of a proverb.
Well, that's a great thing.
It's what the proverb says to you.
Yeah.
So let's get to understand your organizations. What is FilmAid and what do you do?
So FilmAid is a non-profit organization. Our mission is to focus on increasing access to information, and mainly we are working with the marginalized communities. I know FilmAid is well known for refugees, but also, of course, the two counties that are hosting refugees are very much marginalized and in need of information as well. So Turkana County, Garissa County. So we ensure communities have access to information. We create platforms for dialogue around all the social economic issues that are affecting communities. And also we do what is called social behavior change and communication. And what has also been a part of our work is ensuring that we create platforms like this from our media training program we create programs like the film festival, where communities that we serve can present their creative work, their visual work to their communities, but also now to I'd say to the rest of the Kenyans, to the rest of the world. And it's a beautiful work, unique work from, I call it from a special place. The really audiovisual content from Turkana and Garissa is very extraordinary. Not just, for example, the Turkanas are amongst the most natural actors on film, beautiful, natural. So, that's something extremely valuable, that there's a platform where they can present amazing work and share their stories. And I think also what's important, a lot of people don't really know who these people are. You talk about refugees from nearly 20 countries. So to shed a light on who these people that are amongst us are, there are many different narratives about who refugees are, at least as far as I know. Sometimes it's negative because it's been securitized. People connect refugees with insecurity, for example. But actually, when you connect and see their work, see their stories, hear their voices, and interact, then you get a different picture. And also, really, the human person, you see who they are and connect with them at that very personal human level.
So who sees the films that you make?
So our primary target is the communities that we serve. So we produce content to respond, say, to education needs. If you're talking about against child marriages, against FGM, back to school campaigns for children, how do you manage, teenage pregnancies, or having conversations now around integration. What does it mean? How do communities that are refugees live with Kenyan communities? So our primary audience, firstly, is the community that we are serving.
Okay.
Then on the secondary level is then to bring this conversation at the national level with the Kenyan people. So that becomes a different audience, but also engaging with the people that hold responsibilities, NGO workers like ourselves, United Nations like Caroline here, and then also, the rest of the donors that are supporting the work that we're doing. And, there's a lot of ongoing policy development from the government of Kenya Parliament. So having conversations and reaching out to the people that also make relevant regulations to manage refugees. So that becomes our secondary stakeholder for the content that we are producing. And of course, naturally, if you're a content creator, you really want your content to get to the world. You make it so people see, they hear your story. So there's really the whole creative world that we reach out to, through the film festival, but also all our content is online on various digital platforms. So it's also to just reach out to other creatives, filmmakers, and the rest of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Caroline, ILO.
Yes.
From what we learned in school, is the International Labour Organization. It's a UN body, right? So what are you doing in Kenya? And what are you doing with FilmAid that is dealing with local communities?
Eric, indeed, the ILO is the UN agency for the world of work. What many people don't know is that the ILO is the oldest UN entity. 105 years old.
Wow.
The League of Nations, how old is that?
League of Nations, not 100.
Nearly
Not
70.
100,
It's not even 100 years old.
Yeah.
It was in the 40s, yeah.
And so the ILO really came into fore from a social justice perspective. The International Labour Organization gave us the 8-hour day, working day. The ILO gave us the weekend.
Oh, nice.
Especially that, and before that, you can imagine what was happening before that. You worked endless hours to, push an organization's bottom line. And workers were protesting. They were saying, no, we don't have safety in the places where we work. We don't take rest. The ILO gave us the concept of the minimum wage, the maternity leave. A lot of the benefits that we enjoy today in the world of work have come from the ILO. It is a tripartite organization, so we bring together governments, workers, and employers. So in Kenya, our core constituency is the Government of Kenya, the Central Organization of Trade Unions, COTU, and the Federation of Kenya Employers. And these are the most representative trade unions from an employer perspective and workers' perspective. And immediately you can see, because if you want to negotiate minimum wage, there is the worker saying, I need more, probably. Yeah. And then there's the business saying, no, this is not the time for more. And so, and then government exists to set the policies, to sort of be like a negotiator, a go-between. So that's the essence of the ILO. So rights, international labor standards are at the heart of the ILO. And that is what many know the ILO for. Many associate the ILO with industrial action, because people are agitating for better terms of work. But, there are no rights without work. Because if work did not exist, as it were, then what rights would we be speaking about? And that is why Kenya is a member of the ILO since 1965. And, in Kenya, we are working on key issues. Of course, supporting the government of Kenya to implement the international labor standards that Kenya has ratified, and it is so many of them. I don't even remember how many. But very important is supporting the different stakeholders in the generation of more employment. We have this perpetual challenge of unemployment. So what is it that we need to do to ensure that we can get more, especially young people, into jobs, whether it's through supporting enterprises, is it access to finance, is it people don't know how to do these businesses, etc. Another area is skilling, and again, we've had this conversation and people have said over and over again that we have young people that are not a good fit for the jobs that exist. So then we have to look at the skilling ecosystem and see how is it that then we respond to the actual skilling, the actual level and type of skilling that industries and enterprises require. So what are we doing with FilmAid? For a very long time, we've worked with non-displaced populations since 1909, which is when the ILO was founded. But increasingly, and with the SDGs, very strong focus on leaving no one behind. Kenya hosts now roughly 700,000 refugees. There are times when they've been almost 1 million, and that figure, of course, keeps changing. And you cannot actually say that you're on an inclusive development trajectory when you have these 700,000 persons living within your territory without a development focus on them. Okay. And that's exactly where we come in. Countries are asking, countries have been asking, how can we share the burden of hosting refugees? And, one of the ways, why is the burden heavy? Because refugees rely on mostly the international community to support them with food, with education, with healthcare, etc. And in this part of our world, in Kenya specifically, one of the reasons why they're so dependent is because they can't work. Why are they not working? Because there are limited opportunities for work. If you look at Kenya's unemployment, it's already very high. Kenyans are struggling with unemployment. So bring in refugees. How does that conversation go? But also look at where refugees are hosted in Kenya. It's Garissa and Turkana, some of the most really just underdeveloped regions of Kenya. And so how then do we support refugees to support in a labor market that is very small? What are the opportunities out there that refugees can pursue, within the laws of Kenya and be able to make a living and become less dependent on aid? But more importantly for the ILO, it is social justice. Okay. It is just giving them a fair opportunity at life. And that is why we partner with FilmAid.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to mention as well that one of the things about the refugees in Kenya is that quite a number of them have been here also for 30 years. So obviously there is that natural desire to be part of work, to be part of your life, and to take hold and control of your life. So work becomes important. And I think for man to feel dignified, they really need to work. I remember my first experience in Kakuma. just to realize that a grown-up man just sits and waits for everything to be given, which is something that now we are gradually changing. Because, and it's very unnatural. How can you sit every day, day in, out, and expect handouts? So it really takes away the humanity and the dignity, and that is why it's important to really shift and start talking about refugees being part and parcel of how humanity is. And also, I think, being part of Kenyan economy, that, which is something important as well, supporting to build the areas where they live.
Okay. So then looking at how this ecosystem within which they live, that's clear. And we're saying that, look, if you're going to have a progressive economy, progressive development agenda, you cannot ignore the almost 1 million people who are living within your borders, refugees. You can't ignore that. Then there's so many layers to that, isn't it? There's status that needs to be looked at. There's immigration. There is education, like you mentioned. There's health. There is infrastructure. There's so much. They've known their lives for 30 years in a refugee camp. That's what it is. We can't color it differently because that's what it is. So how then is the work that's being done, whether it's using the arts, whether it's using film to portray what it is that they're doing, how is that making the connection between where they are currently and what needs to happen in order for them? And we're not even talking about integration. We're talking about survival. How now is that being used to make the connection between where they are and where they can be?
Just to talk from the creative perspective, which is where FilmAid works, one of the important things about self-expression or about storytelling is that sort of behind your mind, you actually tell what your heart desires, right? Because it's like in spoken word or it's an expression. And we've experienced that many times, that when refugees tell their stories, we understand exactly what it is that they're doing. Or when you talk about engagement, they tell us what it is that they're doing. And that is what is shaping, in fact, the priorities that we collectively have as the Kenya Refugee Operation. We learn from them. And, again, like, we have really also transformed greatly. 15 years ago, education was not a priority, but we've learned from them that that's one of their most important agenda, to actually get their children educated. Because, again, if you imagine the situation back in their home countries, if you're talking about South Sudan or Somalia, someday they need to return home and they need to rebuild. And to rebuild, you need this pathway. And for FilmAid, of course, and as you also know, you're part of the creative industry, part of media. It's also really, it's a very interesting area of practice, because in a situation where refugees cannot move, the work that we're doing, also a lot of it can be done. For example, if FilmAid is doing editing, somebody can sit in Kakuma and do editing for you. They don't need to move. It's one of the spaces where you can work from where you are without having to move. So I think there's really lots of ways why creativity, storytelling links to our greater understanding of the priorities of the communities. And again, we learn a lot how the communities want to be represented. The sector in general had a way of talking about SDGs, the big words, and we are fond of them. We have, thousands of them. But then they bring us down to understand that this is actually who we are. This is how we want to be represented. Not poor people surviving, back in Turkana, but people with intentions for greatness as well. So it's really, creativity is something important just in such a context where there's a lot of limitations, because they bring out something different that otherwise we would not have known. And if you just bring people to conversation, naturally they tell you what they want you to hear. But when you let them express it through art, then they are actually able to tell you so much more.
So how do you do it? Is it that FilmAid then has a College of Arts in Kakuma? Do you enroll students? Are you teaching them after that? How do you do it?
So basically, we have different phases of our program. So the first one indeed is a skills development, which then is around media and the arts. So, of course, there's film as one of the primary tools that we are using, but also FilmAid runs a radio station. So we train in radio technology. We also train in music, theater, and the fine arts. And that is also because of learning how communities want to communicate. And it's very diverse. Some of the communities love to communicate through film, and other through audio, other through poetry. So there is a whole diversity.
Okay.
So we first teach.
So you have a radio station.
Yeah.
Is it that the radio station then has an academy, or are you taking it? So I want to see. Take me through the life of a refugee in Kakuma.
So let me just finalize on the FilmAid. So we basically train on all these different formats, and that becomes our primary partner now to produce multimedia content to respond to the community needs.
So how do you train, Stella?
So we have a training school,
okay,
basically. So we enroll, roughly we train about 100 individuals annually across the different formats. And then, of course, they go on to work with FilmAid because we are producing content. So they are part of that. That continues as part of training and, of course, part of work. Then we have the dissemination, and then we have platforms like this, which is advocacy, influencing decision, conversation with the wider community, with the Kenyans and other types of stakeholders. I am not, I will not do justice to life of a refugee in Kakuma, but in general, just look at the fact that it's a community that lives in. It's not restricted, but at the moment, if you live in Kakuma, you cannot just wake up and live. So they live in this space. The international action is providing various services. So children go to school. There's food distribution from the World Food Program. There's various services around human rights. There are hospitals. They're all, and if you look at the side of Turkana, there's infrastructure. There's a good road all the way to the border with South Sudan. That has also really greatly changed that place because there's now access. And the change in the way also some of the assistance is being provided is becoming important as part of the economy, because previously there was the food distribution in kind, but now with cash-based intervention, there's the whole business community that is there to sell food, because as a refugee, I receive an X amount of money. I go to the market and buy. So it means, there are all these people selling grains, vegetable, and everything that is needed. And so there's a whole really new emerging economy market value chains from Kenya. It's called Down Kenya, all the way to the camps. And I mean, in terms of really linkage to the work that we're doing, we are also seeing then this shift of that sort of 10 years ago chilling in the camp, to a lot of desire for the young generation to find more, to come out, come to the city, get other durable solutions, get further education. And most of, they are already doing so much better than they were before in terms of education. So there are many more people qualifying for university, tertiary institutions. And so there's really a lot of a need also to do more. And that's also kind of worked hand in hand with the change in policy that is already starting to create a platform where people can leave the camp and be part of a bigger society here in Kenya.
So, I mean, let's look at, practically what happens that one would assume that as they go through the education that you speak of, they get training skills, basic, to do certain things. What happens after that? What do you get? Do you have somebody who goes through tertiary, 3 years? Do they go to school in the surrounding county? Do they go to Nairobi? Do they get a diploma certificate at the end of the day? And then what happens after that?
So when FilmAid firstly selects students that generally have done up to high school, say have Form 4 certification, so they get into about a 1-year curriculum with us.
Okay.
So that's the first year with FilmAid. Then the second year, because we basically then have various forms of work that they can do, they really go on to on-job training within FilmAid. So they spend 2 years with us. And some kind of, if you study media in general, so some come work in film, some work in the radio station, some also take on other types of work, photography to, specifically, they want to, in a sense, like start to specialize. And once they are done with FilmAid, after the second year, we basically support them to come into groups, and some work as individuals, but generally from the work that we've been doing. And we've trained, over 1,000 people over time as FilmAid. And so some are within the camps, either working with us, running their own business. They're already up to 20 businesses out of our training program. And some become employees of the operation, working for other organizations across, international organizations as communications staff. Some are working, for example, within the county governments, because our training program targets both refugees and local communities. So some go on to work for the county government and, further basically focusing around media. And then we have some that leave Kakuma and Dadaab, and they come to study within other colleges. And there are those who receive the durable solution of resettlement, so they go to other countries, and it's different. Some go and focus on media communication, some go and do other things, right? As of course all of us went through that youth, finding exactly where we are good at. So what we're seeing is really quite a number of emerging businesses that are taking on media, and the ones that go back to their countries of origin in Somalia and South Sudan are also the main people that are in media there. They're the people that have some form of knowledge in communication, content production, and work for the media industry in Somalia and South Sudan, as well as, of course, within the Operation Humanitarian Development Agencies. So there is really a big market that they go into, but of course it's not 100% because they all kind of identify what makes the sense to them. And just to highlight one of the key things that FilmAid does is we have what we call the media hub, which in simple terms is set of professional equipment, professional teams that continue to be available to these individuals even as they take on their programs or projects and businesses. They have a place where they can still go, access mentorship and support, and of course to really access professional production equipment.
Talking about, it's 2 years of a training program, on-job training, looks really good. It's integrating the workplace, and this is what you're talking about, workplace demand and the training and what they're training. How then do you support FilmAid as ILO and even others in getting the training that they are doing to these communities recognized, maybe certification, and then even when they go back into their countries, that this training that they did while within Kakuma refugee camp is actually still recognized across borders?
Yeah. It's interesting that you posed that question, Eric, because we actually kickstarted conversations with FilmAid on exactly this. And because with the fantastic work that they have been engaged in, and Stella has spoken to what the transitions look like, the different pathways that they do take. But at the same time, it is, FilmAid is not an accredited training institution.
Okay.
Yeah. So the type of training still, if I say this, and Stella is my friend, so she won't really beat me up.
Maybe later.
I'm in a safe space now.
Yes.
Always.
So we've been looking at there's the Kenya National Qualification Framework, which is the blueprint of all qualifications that are acquired in Kenya, both offered by Kenyan institutions and against which foreign qualifications are mapped, just to ensure that they're at par, that the quality, the standard is really good.
Yes.
And so we've had a conversation with FilmAid on how is it that this excellent training that you do offer, that even integrates work-based learning, which is the dream way of training, how do we then ensure that, we go a step further and have it assessed and certified in line with the Kenya National Qualification Framework? And there are various ways of doing this, and we've explored and we've settled on one. But allow me to go back just a little bit. This year, actually, in May, Kenya adopted the recognition of prior learning policy. It's a game changer. Because in essence, this is a policy that allows those skills that have been acquired informally, not within the context of a training institution, on the job experience, to now be assessed and certified. And the truth is, and we see this, that oftentimes there are those that have not necessarily gone through training institutions, but they are so good at what they do.
Good, yes.
I don't want to say the opposite of that, but the reality is that there are those that have excellent papers, but can't do the job as well as those that have been experienced. And so, the recognition of prior learning policy seems to bridge this gap.
Yeah.
And that is one of the entry points that we've seen with the FilmAid training, that how can we leverage on the RPL now, on the recognition of prior learning policy, and be able to align that with the Kenya National Qualification Framework. And there's a whole process where, the tools are developed for assessment, and these students would be assessed at one of the institutions that are recognized in Kenya that offer similar training. And they would say, they'll bring their portfolio of evidence, say, this is the film I did, because it proves that you can actually do the job. And then you are equated along, what level. Equation essentially means this qualification, this experience, and the outcomes that you get from it, where do they fit? Are you at diploma level? Are you at certificate level? You'll be surprised. Some people are so good that they could actually be mapped against a PhD, yet they haven't really been into a formal training institution. So that is the part that we are looking at, and we should be, we are already in advanced stage of this. The other element is, and the beauty of this, you asked Eric, how then does this, because once a qualification is aligned in Kenya, it is much easier then to be recognized, even when you go back home. But if you only go back home with a certificate of participation from FilmAid,
or photos,
or photos only, there's really no equation, and that hinders access to the world of work. That may also hinder upskilling. Maybe you want to move from the level where you are and go get a diploma or go get a degree, unless you have a recognized qualification within a national qualification framework. That may not be possible. So all this is not just for the certification, but we actually do know how the lack of certification can actually be an impediment to actually get into, especially the formal world of work.
It's a rights issue.
It's a rights issue.
So then how do you guarantee, because one would assume, just looking at from, how nations deal with refugees, that there's certain things you look for: re-assimilation, reintegration, at least being able to, how then can these programs contribute towards that expected end? I mean, we talk about, so there are challenges here where it's not fully certified in terms of what you're able to do, but how can they contribute towards that end, where you want you to be able to, one, go back to your country when conflict has reduced to a point where now people are able to live peaceably? So then how will this contribute to that, to say that in the event that should happen, you have been equipped, you have been armed well enough to be reintegrated back, re-assimilated back into your society, based on what you've been able to get, whether it's been in the camp, whether you had a hiatus or furlough where you were able to, get some of this work or this accreditation done for you. how does that contribute toward an end when you look at the bigger refugee umbrella?
Yeah. So we have what are called the 3 durable solutions for a refugee. So one is that you leave your country. Let me just I can use one of Kenya's neighbors. You leave Somalia, seek asylum, and ultimately become a refugee in Kenya. So one is that you could locally integrate. Yeah, often very controversial, political. And I think it is because it is not well understood what integration is. Then there are different levels of integration. The integration that is often thought of is political integration, where people get voting rights. But that's really at the tail end.
Yes.
What many refugees really are looking at, and a survey was rolled out by the IRC on what kind of integration refugees are looking at. The numbers, I don't remember, but they were very negligible. That's the ultimate, but that's not where they are. They're looking at socioeconomic integration. They're looking at forming friendships, building communities, finding a church, finding a mosque, and being a part of that community. They're looking at work. How do I work so that I'm able to take care of myself, but also find meaning in life? Yep. And at that work is where we are at. And ultimately, there's a procedure for becoming a Kenyan citizen that's outlined in the Immigration Act. And that's not, for many of them, that's not it. They want a peaceful community where they can interact with their neighbors, and Kenya is really on a good path towards that kind of localized integration. The other option is what is it called, Stella? Where you go to another country? Resettlement. Resettlement. But it is the dream of quite a number of refugees. Because the resettlement classically happens in the global north. Yeah. It is, resettlement happens Maju.
Yes.
And you know what's the connotation for that? It is thinking about the big highways and
it's better opportunities as well.
It's really just but unfortunately the reality has been that the opportunities for resettlement are smaller and smaller every year, and against a growing number of refugees across the world, because displacement is not just happening and refugees are not just in Africa. We have other wars elsewhere, and so that's a real challenge. And
if I could just, also just one thing to point out and how it affects it is that you also have the world today where there's a lot of nationalist conversations taking place. So the thought of having refugees coming into your country where you're trying to make your country great again comes into play. So how does that then affect that kind of movement? Sorry.
No, that's a political reality, and it's. I don't think we can say it's a secret anymore. That migration has found its way into a lot of political rhetoric in many countries for a very long time in the global north. But it has also now crept into Africa.
Yep.
It's the same rhetoric, and they will take away our jobs, whereas in most cases, really, the jobs are limited, and that is something that needs to be considered. But there are also so many other reasons why they cannot take up our jobs, and some of it is what we are talking about. And finally, the other durable solution is returning home.
Yep.
Yeah, and for many of us that work in this space, we aspire to this, that situation, the reasons that made people flee would cease and people can go back home.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, again, for our sub-region, that is not happening as much because the conflicts are continuing, or where they cease for some time, then things flare up and people who had gone back home find themselves returning back to the camp. So now, what the skilling that is provided, the opportunities that are provided to these refugees, prepare them for all these solutions.
Okay.
Because if I'm trained by FilmAid and I become a really excellent photographer, not only can I showcase the stories of my community, I make money while at it when I'm here in Kenya. If I am lucky, and I use the term lucky really figuratively because that is what resettlement is seen as. If I'm lucky and you go to Canada,
1% solution.
the 1% solution, then I can still take that skill that I have with me to that new country that I go to. And even if I return home, then I can still take that. And so it is, compare that to not having that skill at all.
Yeah.
That is the other side of not doing some of the work that FilmAid is doing.
That's a huge gap.
Yeah.
I mean, just having the skill and not having the skill, right? So then it requires a lot. If you've done 1,000 so far, those 1,000 people, where are they today?
So again, they're in different kinds of places.
Yeah.
Some are in the camps. Some have been able to come to the urban areas because they suddenly have, capacity to do work. And exactly what we're talking about. Once you have the skills, then it meets the opportunity. And so you can come and get hired by KTN or something like this. But, for example, we know really quite a number of refugees that are running businesses here. They're doing, videography, photography, and things like that. And that's one part of it, still within Kenya. And then, of course, there are quite a number that go back home, particularly for Somalia. Nearly our students finish the training program and head to go and run the media.
Next thing
back
is
in
they're
South
heading
Sudan.
back home.
Yeah. In fact, Eric, our trainer there, we're discussing this morning. People just finish the training program and head home because there's absolute work. And then there is also quite a number that go back to South Sudan because there's, all of us are there, and we are very fond of public information, all these things that we can show the glamorous things that we're doing. So there is work within the sector that they go and do back at home. And then, of course, those who've received a lot of opportunities for resettlement, even though it's a 1% solution. And again, once you're skilled, the opportunities actually are more. Once you're skilled, then you're able to go. Because some of the countries that provide resettlement solutions are also looking for people that are skilled. So that's very important. And refugees are starting to do really, really well in terms of education and upskilling as they go along. So there's a whole lot of people really across the three solutions, literally, resettlement within Kenya and back home.
Sounds also that like FilmAid will require, you have the FilmAid radio station, you need a FilmAid TV station locally on that side. You also need a FilmAid film production outfit, so that it's also absorbing. And it's you're able to then train a lot more people because clearly there is need. And there is use.
Absolutely.
For this.
And we are in the communication age, so there's really a lot of need for what we are providing.
I know guys who can give you money.
Great.
Oh, I don't know him.
We'd like to meet them.
But Eric, it's, yes, FilmAid can do that, but FilmAid can also do with greater partnerships because they may not really be able to have everyone get the work-based learning, and there are different opportunities. I really hope that one day we can have some of the graduates or the trainees from FilmAid participate in traineeships at KTN because there's really nothing that stops that from happening. The law allows it because that is a question that many employers have. Can I hire a refugee? Can I offer a traineeship? Absolutely not. I mean, absolutely yes. Okay. Absolutely yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely yes. And but then of course there's a requirement for a work permit which can be processed. It's quite clear how that is done.
All those things can be sorted.
All those things can be sorted, but refugees do have the right by law to work and earn in Kenya.
It's a good thing to know now. There's another place that we can get trainees from. Thank you very much, ladies, for joining us. We've been having a conversation with Caroline Njuki. She is the Chief Technical Advisor at ILO, and Stella Suge, Executive Director at FilmAid Kenya, talking about training refugees, giving them the skills, creative and digital economy that can help them integrate.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.